2006 when you spoke in San Diego, and you were talking about how the New York Times wouldn't review your book or your investigation about it.
Well, it's not even so much the reviews, that I want them to have the information.
Yeah.
In other words, like you take Fukushima. I mean, we have this information here that they knew that the earthquake proofing was faked on these plants. Also the emergency diesel generators that, we had another explosion like this rig in a Deepwater Horizon occurred in this other nation beforehand. The same story could have been prevented. Now, by the way, keep in mind that my stuff is mainstream in the rest of the world. On BBC television, which is the biggest, people say, well, why can't you get a mainstream TV? I am the mainstream. BBC, there's nothing bigger. BBC television is the biggest news broadcaster in the English language. And I write for the Guardian papers. On Wednesday this week, I'm going to have a story on the front page and the inside, like 4 pages of the Guardian, the top of the nightly news on these vultures, who are basically the big funders of the Republican Party, but they're also, this type of creepy activity of the 1%, which is news in the rest of the world. It is not only on the back pages here, it's on the note pages here.
Was that the first time that you encountered censorship that you saw
No.
firsthand? Or you've been encountering this for
I've
as
never
long as
found
you've
it
been
any other
doing-
way.
Yeah.
In fact, the story I'm most known for in the United States is the theft of the 2000 election, when I uncovered that Katherine Harris and Jeb Bush had removed thousands of black voters from the voter rolls, calling them felons. Their only crime was voting while black. And Project Censored gave me an award and a place in the book for it. And that's a shame that it was censored.
Right.
What kind of award is that?
Yeah.
That award, that's a shame, not for Project Censored, but for the American newspapers. But not only didn't they didn't run it at all, zero. There was not one word in the news pages of American papers, except for one tiny article in the LA Times, which said that they are accused of doing this. In other words, like, we're not taking a position, they're accused and the Republicans deny it, and some Democrats charge them with stealing the vote. No, it wasn't Democrats charging anything. It was a stone cold, straight up investigation. We don't do on one hand this and one hand that. But other than the minor LA Times mention, nothing until the Civil Rights Commission said we were 100% correct. Then 2 years later, the New York Times started referencing that story. But they wouldn't run it. They still don't. So you have the same nonsense with the suppression of the story of what happened with the Deepwater Horizon, with the Exxon Valdez, with these current financial vultures. The story of the 1% is not told because the New York Times is the 1%. It's owned by Carlos Salinas, after all, the richest man in the world.
Greg, I heard your segment on KPFA. I was in the studio when you were talking about the pig in the pipeline.
Yes.
And that was... I was just wondering if you could just go over that really quickly about what that means.
Well, I mean, they tell us that the pipeline coming down from Canada to Houston is going to be safe. Well, you only know it's safe because they run this a robot pig through it, which tells you if it's unsafe, if there's cracks, if there's corrosion, it's going to pressure, it's going to explode, it's going to break. But the pig, I found out, was set not to squeal. You do that electronically. It has like these little whiskers and everything else, and it's a robot that sends out beeps and boops and squeals when it encounters problems. So I found out that the software had been jerked with to make it not squeal, because when it squeals, you have to replace that segment of pipe. Every mile of pipe is about $1 million. You're talking easy. I mean, it could be much more.
Yeah.
The problem is that people die. That accident, that what they called an accident in San Bruno, that wasn't an accident. They ran a pig through it. They said, oh, gee, it didn't let us know that there was a problem. That's because it wasn't supposed to let you know that there was a problem. It's software engineers who actually jacked with that. They knew about it because they'd fixed the problem, and they were told to unfix
Fix the voting machines.
Yeah, it was like fixing the voting machines, except that this time you die.
Yeah.
And so, like this Janessa Gregg, who's a 13-year-old kid, she was just incinerated. She was just burnt up by a pipe that exploded because they jacked with the software to save money. So we have that information. I haven't seen that anywhere in the U.S. press. I will put that, and that's the type of thing I put at the top of the nightly news in Britain, in Europe, in Asia, South America. My stuff's all over the place, except my home country. And it is, you know...
This is why we occupy.
And this is why, exactly. This is why we occupy, because we're not getting the news and we're getting the shaft. That's the problem.
And that's why the corporate press is marginalizing this movement. What do you say to people who do marginalize this movement and say that we don't have a cohesive message and we're not unified? And
what's the cohesive? Are you kidding me? Do we not know what the problem is? First of all, you can't have one message because the problem is so pervasive, wide, the disease is so deep. What do you say, that we should fix the tax code? Yeah. These 1%ers aren't paying. When I write about financial vultures, not only are they ripping off the Congo and causing untold misery, when we talk about financial vultures, they're not paying tax on the money. The number one, so that's one. I was down at Occupy Wall Street, some guy under a tarp had a sign that said, prohibit naked derivatives trading. And that is exactly, naked, by the way, means not with your clothes off. It means that it's a type of derivatives trading which is extremely dangerous. That's about as specific as you can get. Yeah, we need that too. What it comes down to is we deregulated the banks. We use that term. What we really mean is we decriminalized behavior. We decriminalized behavior of money manipulation. It's, I write about that in the book. I was a student, by the way, of Milton Friedman. Got my degree in economics under Friedman. And so we have to, first of all, return the rule of law. Law and regulations. They always say, oh, the terrible government, the regulations, the big thick rule books. Well, regulation is the application of democracy to an economy. And that's what's been missing. But the only way we can get something done is to have the information. That's why Project Censored is so valuable. Because it basically says we're going to recognize those stories that people should read that you don't get. And at least try to call attention to a select few to say hello. It's kind of like someone knocking on your skull saying, excuse me, but you've been getting crap information. You're being cheated. That's one of the problems. You're being cheated. It's all photo ops and nonsense.
Absolutely. And what do you think the role is of citizen journalism in the Occupy Wall Street movement? And
there is no other journalism.
Yeah.
In America, so-called professional journalism, people paid on staffs are basically paid whores. I mean, they're not producing anything. They are not reporters. They're repeaters. They take press releases and they rewrite them. They take video setups. They go to press conference and are told what the story is. It's manufactured news. It's not organic news. Okay, so it's manufactured. It's prefabricated. It's handed to them. It's phony. It's fake. It's a lie. It's not news. And they are very dismissive of citizen journalism. Well, there ain't no other journalism. It's when people have the information, the hard information. They say, oh well, no one vets this stuff. Well, as opposed to Chevron vetting the stuff at PBS. So like I said, PBS did an investigation of the Deepwater Horizon. Oh, it's BP's culture, not like the wonderful culture of Chevron. Right. And they literally had a Chevron executive up there, and they were praising him as a guy with a good culture. Well, I go into the Amazon. What I find Chevron's culture of safety is to crap all over the Amazon rainforest and poison kids. Kids are dying. They are killing children. Okay, is that there's no other. They're killing kids. That's their culture. And they were literally laughing about it. They were literally laughing about it when I went to the Chevron guys. And then they covered it up. They tried to cover it up by destroying documents, but I got the document which said destroy the documents. So that's what I get. I go out, that's the other thing, I go out and get these documents.
What else do you need?
It's not that difficult. People say, oh God, you're so amazing, you do all this heavy duty detective work. You know what, I gotta tell you, the greatest journalist ever was probably Yogi Berra, who said, it's amazing what you can see when you look. And that's the problem with American journalists. They're not looking, so they don't see it.
Right.
And they say, like PBS was like, oh, BP ignored safety warnings about oil drilling for years. No, PBS ignored the safety warnings for years. I try to actually get them with my British networks, BBC tried to get PBS to do a joint investigation of British petroleum 15 years ago, 10 years ago, before the Deepwater Horizon. Maybe those guys wouldn't have been killed, but PBS wouldn't touch it. Because, by the way, British Petroleum was funding PBS, but not funding BBC. At BBC, we cannot take any dime from a corporation. There's no Archer Daniel monopoly funded by, brought to you by the good folks, you know, at Chevron or whatever. Chevron's the #1 donor to PBS. Yeah. And that means that it is not only the Gulf which is poisoned with oil, it's PBS which is poisoned with oil. Science is poisoned with oil. I mean, NPR.
Yeah, look at GE.
Yeah.
Their coverage of Fukushima.
And the coverage of Fukushima is ridiculous. It was not coverage. Yeah. And so what's happened is, for example, I have in the book, let me think, what was that example? I'm losing it. In Deepwater Horizon, there's this, all over the papers, there's this story that, well, the oil's gone because bacteria eats it. Nature cleans itself up, right. Okay? And there was a guy, a Dr. Hazen, from right over here at Lawrence Livermore Laboratory. And they had him on National Petroleum Radio on a program called Science Friday. I like to call it Science Payday. But they have all these corporate scientists. Okay, so they had Hazen on, talking about, don't worry about the Gulf, it's all going to be cleaned up because these bacteria clean it up. There was not one mention of the fact that he was given $500 million. Now, I didn't say $500,000. I said $500 million by British Petroleum to investigate the biology of oil spills. Now, of course, he didn't keep it all himself. He had to spread it around. That's the danger. Talk about an oil spill. It was an oil money spill all over the labs of the United States. $500 million spread out and basically flooded all the biology labs and universities around the country. There was not one mention on NPR that he'd gotten $500 million from BP. This guy who said, don't worry, it's all cleaned up. And no dissenting voice was allowed on that program. None. And those who dissent, like I was the head of the biology department at Alaska, University of Alaska, which of course center knew everything from the Exxon Valdez. Yeah. Rick Steiner, #1 expert in that area. Steiner was actually fired by the university for saying, wait a minute, I have an objection to this drilling out there. It's not as safe as they say. You know, yeah, so he's not Hazen, so he doesn't get his $500 million. In fact, he's a tenured professor gets fired.
It's all bribery.
So yeah, so, you know, it's like they say, oh, well, you can't buy us. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. We know that. It's not because they pick out and fund and promote who they want. I mean, again, NPR, they are not reporters. Do you realize that no one bothered? They didn't, you know, I mean, it's not like it's that difficult with Google. Yeah. Who's your guest?
It's Googleable.
Who's your guest? You didn't Google them? I think they know. Yeah. I think they know exactly because they know where they get their money, and it was. I have zero doubt that one of the PR people from British Petroleum placed Hazen. It's poisonous. I'm far more concerned with the political poisoning of the system than the chemical poisoning of the system with oil money. And the poisoning of journalism. That's the problem.
Absolutely. Well, you're doing a great benefit to society. Greg, thank you so much.